Just let me know when we're ready, and I'll start.
Sorry.
Let me know when you start filming.
I have started filming, but I can edit it later.
Do you know how to design?
Sure.
Alright. Hello everyone, my name is Nida Nizam. I'm the current speaker of the PGSS Legislative Council, and I'm going to be sitting in for the Chief Returning Officer, Colby Briggs, who is away right now. I previously moderated the McDonald campus debates, which some of our hosts are here tonight. One of our hosts is here tonight. How this is going to work this evening, essentially, is that I'm going to use this microphone and sound like the Wizard of Oz. And we're going to start with introductions. So each candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds on this handy timer to provide their opening statement. During their opening statement, candidates cannot reference one another. You can only talk about yourselves and your plans. I'm going to be using this timer and I'm going to be resetting it as quickly as I can. We've enabled it so that the alarm goes off. It's going to be really upsetting for the audience, I'm sorry. But it's easier than me rudely cutting people off because you can listen to a machine much more easily than you can listen to me, apparently. I don't have to read any proxy speeches because all of our candidates are here this evening, which is wonderful. The next part will be questions. So we'll be taking questions from the audience as well as questions from Facebook and Twitter, which I guess is like fancy. And I have those things open, don't know what's going to happen with that, but you know, if there is a question, I'm like most definitely going to prioritize asking that. I'm not optimistic. I get to determine the length of this round, so based on how questions are going. We'll see, however, it's already 8:20 p.m. and we're on a little tie-tie, so I'm going to make sure that questions are equally distributed as best I can, and we're just going to cut it off. Next will be the debate round, which will only be for the contested positions of Secretary General and Member Services Officer. So for each of these positions, both candidates will be able to stand, and they will be able to ask one another questions as well as answer them, and they'll only have a minute to do both things back and forth for about 8 rounds, 8 to 10 rounds, depending on how it's going. And after that, there will be concluding remarks from each of the candidates for 2 minutes. So that's a summary of what's going to be happening this evening. All election rules and everything that has to do with discrimination, civil speech, respect, and honesty they apply here. I'm going to be taking note of any bad faith violations or just anything that's probably not good. I'm going to write it down and report on it later because that's my job now. And does anyone have any questions about how this is going to proceed? As one last note for questions, the candidates will also be able to ask one another questions and follow-up if it's on a topic that's already presented by the audience. But obviously audience questions and questions from the internet will take precedence. But if candidates have questions for one another and there aren't many things being asked, then I'll obviously let candidates ask questions. And that's about it. So what we're going to do is start left to right and then right to left. So for opening remarks, I'm going to ask, this is my left to right, which I learned recently are different from your left to rights. It's not that recent. I used to think that there was a God and he washed his hands in the ocean, so we all grow up with weird little crooks, don't we? So what I'm going to do is ask the candidate for Academic Affairs Officer to begin with his opening remarks for 1 minute and 30 seconds. Would you like the microphone?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think I did. Hi guys, thank you guys for coming out. My name is Devin, and I completely apologize. I am exhausted. I spent the entire day writing. So, as many of us do as graduate students, we write. And there are going to be certain days where you're just flat out exhausted. But this is an important reminder that the position that I take with this is that I'm going to be serving you guys. This isn't a position that I believe I'm going to be having throughout my entire career. It's not a career choice for me, but it's an opportunity for me to get involved and to present your voice at the institutional level. My goal is to work in academia. And so I want to take that experience and this experience with me forward as we move forward. Specifically, the platform that I'm standing on, to take a quick look at the time, is that I want to create a communication. I want to create a stream of communication in which the administration can communicate effectively with PGSS members and also with the executive. And that the PGSAs can effectively communicate with PGSS. And so that we can work as a unitary body. That doesn't necessarily mean that we always agree, but that we will actually be much more efficient and will be much more involved in various policies affecting academic decisions and budgetary concerns. I look forward to your questions, and please ask them, because at this moment I'm exhausted and I'm not necessarily thinking of what I've actually prepared for my platform, so I apologize.
Wow, that is as disturbing as I anticipated. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the first candidate for Member Services Officer to go ahead and join the microphone.
My name is Brigida Lungu, and I'm running to renew my position as a member services officer. That means I was MSO this year, and I gained a lot of experience working here at PGSS and representing students at the higher administration. By myself, I'm PhD 5 student in architecture, history, and theory. And I'm also exhausted. I had my meeting very early morning with my supervisor this morning. But apart from that, my platform is so my experience as an MSO this year, the relationships that I created on campus with the other student organizations and the student services administration, particularly the directors. Important to understand about the MSO position is that it's basically the only student representative from PGSS to allocate for student services on campus. That means I have to manage and have meetings with 10 different offices at different levels on top of the administration meetings with the deans and with the principal. Is that it? No. Anyway, I think for next year, I think it's very important for me to stress that student parents are not heard and they're not being, they don't have a voice on campus, so that
I'm always going to be sorry for that sound is off. I'd like to ask the next candidate, Janine Pura.
Right here's good. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jenny Ann Pura. I'm a second-year doctoral student with experimental surgery, and I've been exposed to counsel and the position of MSO over the years. However, I found that this year, in my exposure to counsel, I found that it focused heavily or too much on mental health. I'm not trying to downsize mental health or anything like that. I feel as though it is really important. Considering I do have a healthcare background. However, I feel as though the barrier that mental health is experiencing, based on hysteria and everything like that, the value for potential of growth is very limited. And so certain students have approached me, not just from my department, but students from other departments that I collaborate with. Their concern is transitioning into the workforce, transitioning to potentially furthering themselves in academia. Now, the portfolio for MSO is very widespread, and I'm not trying to say that every service will be tackled, but one thing that I want to try to emphasize is to prepare our students to hold workshops to better equip them with marketable skills. Now, remarkable skills, anything from MATLAB to the simplicity of accounting. Given the opportunity, I would like to explore all these avenues that will better prepare our students for the workforce and potential professors.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite our candidate for External Affairs Officer to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
I always wanted it.
So, I'm Bradley Poor. I started the second year, back up. All right. I'm starting the second year of the doctoral program in law at the Faculty of Law, where I study constitutional law and legal theory. I come from Vancouver and have a BA in politics and a law degree from UBC. I moved here to do a master's in law, and in 2012, 2013, I was academic affairs officer for the Grad Law Students Association, and I sat on PGSS Council. And that experience was a bit mystifying, and it made me want to get more involved in PGSS directly, so that's why I'm doing this today. And my platform is pretty simple. As External Affairs Officer, my job is to represent McGill students outside of the university and to build a coalition in the student movement. So there's a lot of transitions and there's a lot of buzz right now with austerity measures happening, and also reorganizing a student federation in Quebec. So I think my best approach to getting involved in this is to try to create some kind of an open debate and dialogue to hear what students actually think, because I think students can be really dissociated from student politics, but they really care about things like austerity and social movements. So I'd like to try to take advantage of my organizing and social skills to bring people in to sit with me in Thompson House or Mac Campus or whatever, and just hear what people want to say, so I can go back and represent people in the way they want to be. That's it.
Thank you. I'd like to invite John, our candidate for financial affairs officer. Would you like the microphone?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Behrang Sharif. I'm the second year PhD student from the Department of Physiology. I'm originally from Iran, and I did my Doctor of Pharmacy back there in Iran before immigrating to Quebec. So I was involved always in student organization and associations, and the most relevant and recent one would be before getting involved in PGSS was being for 2 years the financial affairs officer, what we called treasurer of a national association for pharmaceutical students. And since I joined McGill from 2013, I've been involved in my PGSA and also a counselor at PGSS. I also sat in Committee on Monetary Affairs, and I helped with the portfolio of an academic affairs officer last year. So my platform for this year, okay, so I'm just trying to see the timer. My platform for this year will have 3 main priorities. First and foremost is clearly having an easy to understand bookkeeping process. So that is the most important task of a FAO, and that would be my first priority. The second one would be reorganizing the services that we have, and the third one would be HR revision, both for involving membership and both for internal affairs and external HR problems.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite our candidate for internal affairs officer.
Hi, my name is Sahil Kumar. I'm running for the position of Internal Affairs Officer. I actually have experience within this portfolio this year. I was on the Internal Affairs Committee, as well as I sat on the Equity Committee, and I was a counselor for PGSS as a member of Experimental Medicine Graduate Student Study. My platform is based upon 3 pillars about how I kind of perceived my first year, my master's. I came in as a student here, and I felt this transition from coming as an undergrad to the master's program that kind of lacked the orientation aspect that most of the undergrads do get. And so working with Clay, organizing a graduate orientation week that more encompasses the questions students have. A lot of our students are also international students, and getting them acquainted to McGill and the community. Second of all, I would like to increase counselor and committee member interactions and understanding of council matters. A lot of us came into this not knowing what it is, what the position holds, and having, I think, briefings and meetings with councilors to help them understand the motions and debates that are coming for the council, I think is really important. And finally, also having interaction with PGSAs. As a PGSA member, there was kind of a lot between the PGSS and committees, and so I think increasing that involvement is also important. If you have any questions, we may direct them at me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite our first candidate for Secretary General. Danielle, would you like the microphone?
I'm okay. All right, hi everybody. Thank you so much for sticking around. My name is Danielle Topolino. I'm one of the candidates for Secretary General this year. I'm currently a first-year master's student in neuroscience, and I am one of the representatives of neuroscience on the PGSS Council this year. So I'm basically running on a platform that's centered around 3 things. The first being my experience. I did my undergrad here, so I was very involved in student politics here at McGill. And a lot of the things that I did in undergrad involved coordinating with the administration. So I already know the current administrative staff here at McGill, have a good working relationship with them, so that will allow me to transition into the position of Secretary General very easily. As a PGSS council leader this year, I've gotten to know how PGSS works. I've spent a lot of time talking to the current executives, the current commissioners, and trying to figure out what they do, how they see next year going, and I think that will give me definitely a leg up going forward. Going forward, I would also like to make sure that our next year's executive is a cohesive unit. We don't have to agree, as Devin so aptly said, we don't have to agree with each other, but we need to come together as a representative whole to represent the student population. That's really important to me, and I think that I have the experience that will let me do that. The last thing is I want to be proactive in our collaboration with the administration. We have a lot of issues that we want resolved, but I think the best way to go about doing that is as often as possible to go to them with a number of possible solutions, rather than just going, with the process.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. I'd like to invite our final candidate for Secretary General.
Okay, my name is Saturn Ndondala. Before coming at McGill, I was at the University of Cape Town where I did my undergraduate studies in economics at the University of Cape Town, and I was the president of the student society of all undergraduate students at the university. And then I went to France where I did a master's degree in sociology at the Sorbonne University, and I did another master's degree in management at the Sorbonne also, and I was also very involved into student politics. And after that, I came to Canada. I went to the University of Toronto at Trinity College, where I did a master's degree in religion studies. And from there, I decided to carry out my PhD. So I'm doing a PhD here, but I'm in the Faculty of Education, if you want it. And my main concern for running for the PGSS, specifically, I'm going to run for the budget, because I think some students are paying too much fees in terms of student contribution to the association. So I'm thinking to cut the budget, and one of the things I'm proposing is like I'm not going to take any income, because the current Secretary General is earning like $15,000 a year. So if I'm elected, I'm not going to take that money. And the second thing, I'm going to stand for equity, because I think gender equity is very important on campus. The third thing, I'm also standing for transparency, because I think like transparency in terms of communication between the PGSS and also the students are very important. I have been like in student politics, but for me this is kind of very deception, because I've never been in a university where there's a campaign but we have so many few students. So
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the candidates for their opening statements. We're now going to move on to questions from the audience. So if any of the audience members have a question, I would ask them to just introduce themselves and speak up. Can I help you?
Sorry,
well, please wait until I'm finished speaking for you guys to raise your hands. What I'd like to ask you guys to do is just please to say your names loud enough that you'd be heard in the camera. And if possible, like if you could even orient the camera towards them while they're asking. I just want to make sure that is clear. And then please, the candidate to whom you're directing your question, and if you're directing it towards multiple candidates, I'd ask that you make it like really clear what you're doing, because I would prefer to not have like 3 or 4 people answering the same question and repeating themselves. Unless you have a very specific question directed to 3 people for a very good reason, which I'm sure you can articulate. I think you all understand where I'm coming from. So that being said, would you like to ask the question first?
Yes, please. Hi, my name is Nikki Meadows. I'm the current Financial Affairs Officer. And my question is for both of the Secretary General candidates, but specifically, Secretary, because I know you mentioned equity, but there are lots of types of equity that PGSS is that we find to be important, including sexuality and religion and all sorts of other things. So I'd like you to comment to that, because the only one you mentioned is gender.
Would you like to respond? You can stand.
Yeah, because of the time lapse, so
want-
basically I'm going to stand for gender equity, against sexual harassment, religious freedom, tolerance, all those things, LGBT issues. So all those things I'm going to stand for. And based on my background, like in religious studies, I think those are very main concerns that everyone is thinking about. And I think so, because right now, if you read the McGill tax report of tax force report of 2011, they want to make the campus much more diverse in everything. So, because most of the time we always speak about quantitative diversity, basically based on the quota of international students, but McGill is trying to make a kind of qualitative diversity in terms of socializations and the acculturations of many people around here. So all those concerns are going to be one of my main objectives. I'm so sorry because my English is not very consistent, so I have to find words how to be much more specific, because I'm much more a French speaker.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to fix this for 1 minute. All right, I would like to invite someone to ask the next question in the back.
Hi.
I'm sorry, it was just, specifically.
No, it was to
sorry, I'm sorry, if you could go ahead and please.
I
ask
said
them.
to both, but specifically aiming at the comments that he said.
Okay, so I'll obviously afford you an opportunity to please respond as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll be really quick. That was something that I didn't have time to mention in my input, but that's one of the things I want to make available to everybody's equity training through SEED. Also, I want to make it mandatory for all executives and commissioners, so all of the officers and all of the commissioners to have training in equity and mental health first aid as they come into their term.
Thank you very much. All right, would someone like to ask the next question? Yes, in the back.
Hi, Amanda Weingartner. I'm the outgoing Environment Commissioner. This question's directly related to Saturnin, although the other candidate for SecGen can answer as well if you'd like. You mentioned in your platform, and I think it was the Tribune, that you would like to eliminate PGSS executive salaries. So my question is, given the current climate around the need for graduate, like valuation of graduate work, you know, we know the strikes that have just ended at U of T and York University, if you think that there would be a negative impact or a degradation of graduate student contribution to student politics, given the substantial time commitment and resources that PGSS executives have to put into the society, if you were to eliminate salaries? I can clarify.
Yeah, would you have a clarification or are you prepared?
That's okay.
Okay, so go ahead.
I was the president of the Student Society at the University of Cape Town. I hold the same position, and I have been able to implement the policies or like to achieve the goals without being paid. And at McGill here, we have so many student societies, like in each department, they are doing the same job. So I don't see why the Secretary General of the PGS must be paid for that reason. And beside that, the PGS Secretary General can work from home. So we don't have any substantial reasons why the person cannot be paid for that reason, because you cannot prove that every time you work for 15 hours. So I strongly believe that it is feasible in many universities. People who are involved in student politics are not paid. So it's a matter of being very concerned with the issues that other people are encountering. And it's also based on the charity, because I want to show to everyone that I'm standing for fairness, and I want basically everyone also to get the same, experience.
Next question.
Can I follow up?
How many other, does anyone else have a question that they're going to be asking soon? Okay, go ahead, you can follow up.
Okay, 2 follow-ups. One, do you think that the PGSS executives do an equivalent amount of work to the PGSA presidents? And 2, is it possible for the SecGen to engage with students if they're only working from home?
When you're prepared, you can reply, and also please refrain from conversation here at camera. Are you prepared for reply?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
When I was running, that's what was Corey told me, that the PGSS can work from home because you don't have like a specific office on campus. That's what I was being told. And I strongly believe, as I said before, that it is feasible. It's a matter of being equitable, and many students here are struggling basically to pay the fees. And sometimes if you see like your bulletin, like in terms of the fees that you pay, like you have so many columns about the fees that students have to pay on the PGSS. So based on that reason, because it's very easy to say, okay, I want the fee to be decreased, but I'm saying that I'm going to start those austerity measures myself. I'm going to start on my own side. And if that is feasible, I'm also going to ask for a referendum where students have to vote next time if they want the PGSS executive to be paid in the near future. So I'm going to propose it as a referendum. And it's up to the student to vote yes or not if they want. But for me, if I'm elected, definitely I'm not going to take the 15,000 Canadian dollars that is paid to the secretary.
Thank you very much. Would you like to ask the next question?
Hi, Nikki Meadows, FAO again. I have a follow-up question to what you just said. You listed that there's these whole list of fees. Do you happen to know what any of these fees are and/or what the breakdown of what they're deigned for? Because many of them have very specific purposes that are designed to support graduate students. So, can you tell us what some of these fees that are collected are for?
Thank you. I'm an international student. I'm paying roughly around like 1,000 Canadian dollars for insurance. That is like, medical bill. But on top of that, when I take my PGSS bill, I have also done an extra like $120 for the kind of insurance. I don't know why can we have like a kind of dichotomy of the same fees. No? So those kind of issues that I'm trying to resolve. And then I also saw some of the fees regarding like kind of cafe, whatever, like a restaurant, like night when you can stay over and midnight stuff. Yeah, but it's not for free. So what should we like pay for those fees? And when I know that if I have to go in the coffee shop, I have to pay again. So those kind of extra things, I think they are very quite ridiculous. So we need to get rid of them. But I'm not saying that basically I'm just going to take like the paper and say I'm going to scratch this. Everything is going to be put on the referendum. So what I'm standing for is that if I'm elected, there is going to be
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's it. myself. I'd like to take some questions for some other positions if there are any.
Can I ask one follow-up to mine?
Could you hold on for 1 second? Do you have a question for
Can I-
your opponent?
Can I respond really quickly?
Yeah, I should definitely, you have to have the opportunity to respond as well.
I just want to say I really appreciate your question. That was a really good one. I think that the reason that PGSS executives are paid is an accessibility issue. So there are a lot of students who can't afford to spend the time to be PGSS executives, as well as do something external to their general lab work, so be a TA. And so the fact that there is a stipend associated with this position, or there is a salary, it's allowing students who otherwise wouldn't be able to hold these positions. It's giving them the money to be able to do to represent their fellow students. In terms of the midnight kitchen fee, that allows they accept donations if you're willing to give it, but it's allowing students on campus who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford lunch. It's allowing them to eat. So I think we've got a lot of good initiatives in place, and student fees pay for those. I hope that answers your questions. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there further questions for any of the candidates? There are other candidates too. Yes, in the front. Could you please stand and introduce yourself?
Elizabeth Collier-Fusé, current health commissioner at PGSS. So my question's for Jenny Ann. I don't know if you know, but 2 years ago there was a joint board senate meeting, which are the two highest bodies at McGill to address mental illness on campus. And one of the reasons was that 20% of Canadians between the ages of 18 and 24 endorse either having a mental illness or a substance abuse problem. It's an issue that's rampant on campus, and suicide is one of the top 2 reasons for student death. Currently, mental health services is only seeing students that have been on a wait list since October. So given these facts, why are you not endorsing supporting mental health services as part of your platform?
Thank you very much. Would you like to respond?
Thank you for your question. So I'm not saying that I'm not endorsing it or that I don't believe that it's important. Well, my focus was predominantly for helping as many students as possible, and that would be the focus on the whole creation of workshops and marketable skills, because students will be able to use that for sure as soon as they transition after their graduate experience. I heavily believe that mental illness is extremely important. Having said that, I was a peer helper in my undergraduate years. With that network that I had to learn from counselors, I volunteered my time, and I do agree that there is a really big issue for students. But by accessing the network, these counselors are extremely overwhelmed, and so by having student volunteers, it'll help alleviate the stress and the bottlenecking. Yes.
Thank you very much. We have 2 questions. I think because I have been kind of unreliable, I'm making sure both candidates can have a chance to answer the questions for one. After these questions, if you ask a question for one of the candidates of a contested position, I'm just going to say and assume that you're asking to both, because that's probably the best way to do it. So for the next question, would you like to go in the front? You've not asked anything yet.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
my question
Please
was.
stand and introduce yourself first.
Okay, my name is Julian. I'm the
Please stand.
current external affairs officer, and my question is to both candidates for the member services position. I'm actually curious to know, like, considering the current austerity climate and like the trickle-down effect it has on the university resources, is it reasonable to expect that by adding just more and more pressure to like mental health and things that we've worked on over the past year and where we've seen like very small advances, is it a good return on investment basically? Shouldn't you try to explore some other more creative avenues?
Okay, I'm going to ask Rita to answer first, because Jenny Ann answered the question most recently. So go ahead whenever you're ready.
I think you're not aware of how much of the services have actually improved a little bit since there was so much pressure. Yeah, a little
No,
bit. But
like what
No
specifically?
commenting, please.
Sorry.
She just
Yeah.
answered the question.
So, as you may or may not know, the CSS, the Committee on Student Services, is a very active and strong committee for students because they have parity. So we have an actual voice, and anything that is recommended in that committee, it is taken up to the higher levels. From that committee, we had created the mental health working group, which was started I think 2 years ago. It's still active right now. From that group, they created they made strong recommendations that they address the issue of the two counseling services, so counseling services and mental health services, two separate offices that do not talk and do not work together, which is a big issue. Students should not have to deal with the intricacies of McGill bureaucracy when they're in the most need and most vulnerable.
Thank you very much. Jenny Ann?
So Joanne, can you repeat your question again?
So basically, considering that there's been a lot of efforts to push mental health agenda at McGill, and that we've seen a lot of caucus discussions, but very little concrete advances on the ground for students who need help. Is it a good investment to continue pushing that? Should we choose, or should we just try to conserve what we require over time?
I don't see, thank you for your question, but I don't see a problem by continuing to pursue any of those efforts. Definitely, because it is such an issue, we should continue what's been started or possibly enhance what they're offering in terms of alleviating any of the issues with the mental health stigma. But based on the limitations of just pursuing that, this position, because it's so widespread, has the opportunity to be able to enhance the whole student body for grad students. So not just focusing on just one particular pillar, but being able to tap into other services and enhance those programs, I think would be in all of the students' best interests. So just being able to look into all the services available to students. That'd be my answer.
Thank you very much. Next question in the audience. In the back.
Amanda Weigartner, outgoing environment commissioner. So this question's mostly for Jenny Ann, but Brigitte can feel free to answer as well. So my question is, you mentioned these workshops that you want to create that focus on grad students transitioning outside of graduate school. So two-part question. First is, how would these be different from what's already offered by like skill sets and career planning and services? And second part question is, can you name a specific service that the MSO is already responsible for that you would improve and how you would improve it?
Sounds directed to Jenny.
All right, thank you for your question. How would it be different for skill sets? It wouldn't be 100% different. I don't believe in creating something that, let's say, already exists. That's why in my platform I say to enhance services that are already available, and particular programs like skill sets is extremely beneficial. But to tap into that, to allow as many grad students as possible, is to potentially, let's say, have it based at Thompson House. To be able to collaborate with them and potentially have more interdisciplinary collaborations with existing programs. Being able to have a conversation with them that would be best suited for grad students, I think would be in everyone's best interest. To say, okay, these are the particular workshops that would enhance this marketable skill, or for particular students to pursue this particular field. So it's not just creating something from scratch, because that's redundant.
Brigitte, would you like to also respond? Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just going to cut you guys off very quickly because it's 8:52, so I think I'm going to take, I'm going to take 2 more questions after this one, and then we're going to move on to the next one, so go ahead.
Can you just repeat the...
Yeah, so the second part would be applicable to you. What's a specific, can you name a specific service that you're already responsible for and how you would improve it?
Right. So I'm going to continue with what I was answering to Julian earlier, which is student services in particular are always under threat of budget cuts. So I think it's important to always actually push and advocate for students and more services, because no matter what happens, they will always try to cut it down as it happens as we speak. In terms of advocating for a particular office, so SEED is actually expanding a little bit their portfolio, and they just created this new position on family care coordinator, which comes from family care caucus at PGSS, many years of advocacy, maybe 4 years of advocacy on that side, and now finally they're creating it, given it with the like student money still. But that is one office that I would like to work with very much so, and make sure that it's right now it's for 1 year. They're going to evaluate it next year, so I want to make sure that it's going to be taken off next year as well, and then hopefully it's going to become permanent under McGill umbrella and not in student services fees.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna take 2 more questions. Yes, you have a question? And, okay, so we're gonna have you two do the last questions, and then I'll ask if anyone has any burning ones that they'll just die if they don't ask, and then we really have to get moving to the lightning rounds. So we'll start on my left, and then we'll go right, so go ahead.
Wait, am I the left? Okay.
Eric Larson.
My left.
Eric Larson, concerned student. Sorry, I don't have a fancy title to throw behind my name. So there's been a lot of talk about student movements, especially around either austerity measures or fossil fuels, and I was just wondering if any of the candidates, this is open to all the slate, or any person who's up there right now, has a stance they're interested in taking on or that they want to speak against, or anything about student movements in Quebec. I'm just curious to see.
How many people would like to answer this question? Was your question specifically asking if anybody here has a particular political issue?
Yeah,
Or
like
is
that they
it
want to
like-
bring up within the province or the country that students are primarily involved in.
Okay, so I
Mainly
would-
the austerity measures in Quebec right now is what I'm
Sure, so this has been asked, I think, to general candidates, so I think Brad, if you wouldn't mind answering first, does that make sense within your portfolio, and then we'll offer the opportunity for other candidates to answer as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously with my background, I am a pretty political guy. So I personally would, like, I'm pretty firmly against austerity, and I'm pretty firmly for movements in, like, environmental, involving the university environmental movement. However, I realize that representing students is not the same as advocating for your politics. So that's why I hope to have a kind of a conversation around it, and that does involve me expressing my own personal opinion that austerity is bad for students who are here. It's very bad for students who don't get to be here in the first place, and it's bad for the society in general. So I do have a pretty firm stance against that. And coming from BC, there is something special to the student movement in Quebec, and I think it makes, we don't want to lose that. So I'd like to just, I want Miguel to be as involved in that as possible.
Thank you very much. Okay, so who else would like to respond? Okay, so we'll have the 2 secretary general candidates respond. So Terry, you can begin, and then Danielle.
When I was in France, like in 2012, before coming to Canada, and we were watching like all the events regarding the strike in Quebec, one of the things that came out of my mind, like basically students at McGill did not get involved, they didn't even want to participate. So if I'm elected, basically, based on my background in striking and student movements, really, I will try to encourage students, and not only postgraduate students, but also like those who are from undergraduates, to partner so that we can strike together with other students from Quebec. Because we need to make the government know that really education is a human right, and we cannot negotiate the right to be educated in a fair environment at any cost. So that is my concern, and I'm standing for that, and it's going to happen if I'm in.
Thank you very much. Danielle?
That's a really great question, and I'm going to reiterate a little bit of what Bradley said. It's important as a student society to be able to present the members with all of the options. So if there are people striking, all of our membership should know when and where these people are striking, what they're striking for. But I think it's also very important that the population that we represent as a whole is aware of the other things that are being done to counter austerity. So if you're not the kind of a person who wants to go out and strike, and there's student populations that are discussing things, you've got round tables, I want to make sure that our population of students gets all the information of all the various ways that they can participate in these kind of events. It's not my place to tell the students whether or not they should strike. If the student body wants to strike and that's what they want to do, I will of course support them in doing that. But I think it's very important that anything related to student politics is driven by what the students as a whole want to do.
Thank you very much. Any other candidates? Danny?
I just wanted to make a quick comment. EGSS, the Education Graduate Student Society, actually did a recent survey, and we found overwhelmingly that our members don't want to strike at all. They actually feel as though that the purview of EGSS and possibly like-minded PGSS doesn't have any business with regard to addressing political concerns. This is an individual matter. In fact, one student quoted, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but said, if you guys strike, I lose that money. Why would you dare strike and sacrifice my money? Everyone has the right to, of course, protest. I'm not trying to take that away from you. But as far as it goes with advocating for organizing a massive strike and risking individuals' tuition, if you're so concerned with fees and whatnot, that's not something I'm going to necessarily advocate for. I will always advocate for the student's voice, for student services, but the political
Thank you very
aspects are
much.
something else.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to answer this question? All right. Would you like to ask the final question?
Ah.
All right, we'll take, there's
Or
two.
give it to me.
Sure.
You can both ask one more question, it's fine, but let's, no follow-ups after that we're done, okay? It's 8:59.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My question is directed maybe one of the, so I'm Yanni Bresta, I'm the current Secretary General. It's directed to maybe hopefully one of the unopposed candidates can speak to this, but
Yes.
not all of you. So you chose to run as a slate, and you also in your slate put the two people that are running contested. So I'm wondering if you can explain your justification for doing that, as opposed to, for example, running as a slate and not choosing the contested position, but a bit of your reasoning for doing this. Thank
So
you.
to clarify why they chose one candidate for each of the contested positions?
Yeah, and why they chose it all, and why they chose, yeah.
Sure, so for the uncontested positions, there are 4 of you. Would anyone like to answer first? Sai?
Thank you for your question. So this slate was built on the 4 uncontested positions as well as the Secretary General position and MSO. Secretary General, I worked with Danielle as when she was the president of SUS. I was on as the VP internal for SUS. We've been working together for 3 years. I wholeheartedly support her for a position of Secretary General. I think she would do a great job. She is well versed in McGill politics and bureaucracy. I think that having someone who has that experience coming into this, basically the voice or the head of PGSS is really important, that you know how McGill works. For MSO, the position is a re-elected position. I think the only person who returning would be the MSO if she was re-elected. Having institutional memory is really important coming from student politics. That transition period and the ability to rely on someone who knows the system is really important. So I think that is why we supported these other 2 candidates for their positions.
Thank you very much. Would one of the other unopposed candidates like to answer? Brown?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
he asked it to multiple people, so it would be best if more than one person.
Whoever wants.
I think it
because
would be better if
it
more
would
than
be-
one person on the slate answered that, just
because it's
there's
more
one-
mostly reiterating it. So I just want to just add one point about choosing for and against in the contested positions. It's not only that we chose the person who we see ourselves working easier with, but also not choosing the person that we are concerned about the manners of a teamwork as a teamwork player, and that I'm just mentioning one of the contested positions.
Thank you very much. No, is it there either of the 2 of you wishing to say something?
Sure, I'll make a quick comment.
Can you please stand?
Yes, ma'am.
The reason I'm supporting more than one of these is because no one position here runs the slate, so it would just be best if multiple voices from the slate spoke
I was
up.
photoshopped in there, so I don't know what's going on.
Well, it's not even Photoshop.
Photoshop wasn't. No, I honestly, I've met Danielle Sale. I've met Santurn a couple times. I've met Janie Ann. I've met Brad. I've met all of them. Fantastic people. I would love to work with them in different venues in a given moment. We ran this slate as an idea for a collective partnership, but that suggests that we also are partners together. There is the candidate, one of the candidates for Secretary General, Santurn. In my opinion, I don't believe as though we could necessarily coalesce our ways in which to advocate for policy change. Santurn really believes as though that he can be aggressive with administration. He believes that he can force something down administration's throat. At the Mac campus debate, he said it will be with regard to the Mac campus shuttle, without any question. He has talked about slashing fees and slashing executive pay. I don't believe that I can necessarily work with that. Would Janie?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I had that.
Brad, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'm kind of just reiterating the same. Like I decided to nominate myself pretty last minute and then join the slate sort of on the fly. But I just, having met everybody, I like everyone on the slate. I have a strong preference for Danielle as Secretary General. Honestly, I need to make my stipend because I am broke. And so that's one reason. But I'm pretty happy to work with anyone really. But I don't know. I just ended up deciding because everybody seemed cool.
Thank you very much. There's one question remaining in the back.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sorry?
Uh,
Hold on 1 second. Do you have a question?
I think he'd like to respond.
Technically, in the question period, candidates can refer to one another, and this question was directed to the members of the slate. What you can do is bring that up during your closing statement or in the lightning round, but there's nothing written about what I'm supposed to do in this situation, so I'd prefer to not do anything, just to also... I'll think about it while this next question is asked. So if you would ask the last question.
Sure. So, Amanda Wagner, outgoing environment commissioner. This is a question for Danielle and Bradley because you both either mentioned this tonight or referenced it in your online platform. So, as most of us know, there's internal conflicts within the FOOC. Membership within the FOOC was one of the key arguments given for leaving the CFS. The current external affairs officer, and I'm paraphrasing, has stated that continuing to work with the FOOC would be in PGSS's best interest, but Danielle in her online platform said that she supports negotiations of a new student organization. So I'm just wondering if you could be explicit about what your opinion is regarding continued membership in the FOOC, and if you propose leaving the FOOC, what you would like to see instead.
Okay, Danielle, go ahead first, since Brad just answered the question recently, and then Brad.
Okay, that's a really good question, thank you. When I had my interview with the Daily, that was when I was under the impression that the FOOC was there was no viability after the end of the summer. In the case that the FOOC does survive through the summer and is a viable organization, I obviously would like to educate the student population and see what their opinion is in terms of the representation we can get with the FOOC and the representation we can get with whatever this new body is if it's created. So I hope that answers that question. Please feel free to follow up. And sorry, was there a second part, or is that?
No, that pretty much answers it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to explicitly know what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've had discussions with the current leaders of other student organizations across Quebec. I think at this point I've got good working relationships with almost all of them. So I think that moving forward, if we decide to make a new organization, we're in a very good position for that. In the case we stay with the FOOC, Julienne's got good connections there, and I'm hoping that we can be transitioned in. So whatever the students want.
Sorry, thank you very much. Brad, go ahead.
In all honesty, this is something I need to get my hands into and learn more about because it's kind of a big mess. I pretty much would reiterate what Danielle just said. I'm not sure at this point that I can say whether staying in the FOOC or starting a new federation is better. Also, it's like we don't really know when it's going to be around. I think the most important thing is just to keep the PGSS as a key player if we're going to build a new organization, and that's just about being open-minded and building networks or something I'm going to be starting to do. I don't really have, I haven't been that involved really, to be honest. But yeah, so I guess we'll see.
Thank you very much. That brings an end to our question period. I'd like to now invite the candidates for Secretary General up to to stand in the front. And I'm just going to explain how the lightning round will work one more time. We had a chance to sort of rehearse. Well, we were pretty hard at the MAC campus, so let's see if we can do it better this time. So essentially how this works is that you have 1 minute to both ask your question and answer your opponents. So whoever speaks first will get a little bit of a longer time, but whoever speaks second will be the last person to speak overall. So, like I said, immediately when you speak, you ask your question, and your opponent has to answer it. And within the 1 minute here, which I'm just going to be hitting hard, you have to also ask your question. Does that make sense to everyone? Because it did not make sense to me when I first read it in now. Okay. All right. Great. So, does anyone have a coin flip on who can go first here? You have a coin flip? I have a pen. I should have one.
Looks like Yanni's got it first.
All right. Ready? So turn on my left. Go ahead and call it. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Heads or tails? You have to say heads or tails.
Tails.
Okay, so Daniel, you're going to go first.
Okay.
All right, so 1 minute, your question, and then here we go. You just ask the question.
Oh,
first.
to start? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. So Saturday, what have you done this year to get socially involved with PGSS and its members?
Right when I came at McGill, my first semester, the first thing I did, I became a member of the advisory committee of PGSS. That's the things I've done. And I'm in the committee of the advisory committee in the PGSS. Okay, that's the first thing I've done, despite being new at McGill. Secondly, despite the fact of being involved into my studies, I have delayed my candidacy exam in order to go to Quebec City, and I think I went with you in terms of trying to participate in the creation of a new student association in Quebec. So those are kind of the things I've done.
You should ask your question.
Okay, McGill is talking about diversity. We have been speaking like on McDonald campus regarding how McGill wants to be much more open in terms of like being open to the francophone environment. So I'm going to ask you this question in French because since you said that.
There's no provision for what happens when you don't actually use your time. What?
So does it just go to the next one?
I think you should just ask your question.
Okay, I'm going to ask a
One
question in French because you said that you are going to work people in Quebec.
No, don't say anything, I'll just ask the question.
That's the question, okay, in French, okay.
And then after this, I'm going to cut you off for 20 seconds, both of you.
Quel est le paroxysme du praxisme de votre vademecum primosotique? C'est ce que j'aimerais savoir. Quel est le paroxysme du praxisme de votre vademecum primosotique?
Even I don't understand what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Hold on. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to, what? I think, because I'm the moderator and I don't speak French, it's not really, like, my French is very poor. I'd actually prefer if we don't do this, and then maybe at a later time we can figure out a system. So if you could just ask your question in English, that would be best.
Okay, I was thinking that because of that. Okay, okay. What is the most salient point of your overall objective? That was my question.
The most salient point, I really want to make sure that next year's executive is cohesive so that we can best represent the student body. I think that we represent the student body most effectively when we can present a united front and come to consensus on all our decisions. Okay, so questions moving forward. What is your stance on the cuts at student services for mental health and the OSD?
I think mental health is a very great concern, and we don't need really to cut. So we are going, if I'm in, basically I'm going to negotiate with the administrators in terms of keeping those services intact.